Victoria Custodio, and I'm part of the Active Transportation Resource Center's Technical Assistance team, and I'll be facilitating our webinar today. Today's webinar is entitled Safe Routes to School Activities, Adaptations, and Insight During the COVID-19 Pandemic. This topic was identified at the last Active Transportation Resource Center teleconference in July as the most pressing issue for our Active Transportation Resource Center non-infrastructure network. And as such, we've assembled a stellar team of presenters in direct response to this ask. Our team of presenters represent national, regional, and local expertise who have been asked to be with us today to share resources and discuss examples of how they, as Safe Routes to School leaders, have been pivoting from initial Safe Routes to School action plans and continuing to adapt their efforts to ensure that active transportation and safe walking and bicycling opportunities and practices are not lost amidst a year of immense challenge, pain, and hardship caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. I am certain that our panel will also inspire you with their thoughtfulness and creativity as they have already done our Active Transportation Resource team. Next slide. As with all of our Active Transportation Resource Center webinars, our team is intentional in what we would like you as the attendee and at a minimum to learn as a result of your attendance today. On that note, our two objectives are as follows. As a result of attending this webinar, you will be able to identify 2 to 3 existing resources available to assist Safe Routes to School practitioners and partners with planning and implementing safe and meaningful Safe Routes to School activities during COVID-19. And secondly, describe at least 2 existing challenges for Safe Routes to School practitioners during COVID-19 and examples of how those challenges have been addressed by existing practitioners. Next slide. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers that we'll hear from today. First, from the Safe Routes to School National Partnership, we have joining us today the team of Corey Johnson and Becky Gilliam. From the Oregon Metro Safe Routes to School program, we have Noelle Mickelberry. From Redwood Community Action Agency, we have Jenny Weiss. And from the San Mateo County Office of Education, we have the team of Therese Valles-Kelly and Vanessa Castro. On the Active Transportation Resource Center side, we will also have a brief presentation from Caltrans Active Transportation Program Assistant Program Manager, Summer Anderson-Lopez. And although she's not presenting, you may hear her voice today throughout the webinar. I want to introduce my colleague, Marianne Hernandez, who is hosting our WebEx and with whom this webinar would not be possible. Okay, next slide, please. All right, I had to split the agenda into 2 slides, but just very briefly, this is an overview of what we'll cover today in our agenda, which actually takes us till noon Pacific time. And then following this, our presentations will occur. So after this overview, we'll hear first from Summer Anderson-Lopez of Caltrans ATP, who's going to give us a brief presentation to review updated guidelines for modifying active transportation program non-infrastructure scopes of work that require modification due to COVID-19. We will then shift to our first team of presenters, Corey Johnson and Becky Gilliam from the partnership, who will share highlights from the partnership's Back to School 2020 guide that provides recommendations for Safe Routes to School programming for 3 major types of schooling scenarios that we are seeing and observing in response to COVID mitigation. We will then hear from Noelle Mickelberry of Oregon Metro, who will share highlights from a regional Safe Routes to School Back to School Toolkit that was also created in response to COVID and the pandemic. She'll highlight a lot of the planning that went into preparing the toolkit and some of the messaging that's emerged. After Noelle's presentation, we will hear from Jenny Weiss from the Redwood Community Action Agency, who will share with us her experiences with challenges and adaptations as the Safe Routes to School coordinator and task force lead for Safe Routes to School initiatives in Eureka, which is in Humboldt County. For those of you who are not familiar, Humboldt County is in the northern part of our grand state of California, and it's quite rural in nature. And then our last formal presentation will be from Therese Valles-Kelly and Vanessa Castro from the San Mateo County Office of Education. Therese and Vanessa are going to tag team to talk about bicycling and pedestrian engagement in the time of COVID-19, and we've asked them to spend a little more time sharing their efforts to grow an annual event called Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. We anticipate that each presentation will take about 20 minutes. To ensure that that all presenters have enough time for their presentations, we're going to actually not take questions until a question and answer after all presentations have been completed. And then we'll wrap up after all the questions have been exhausted or as close to noon as we can. At that point, I'll just issue a reminder to give us some of your feedback to our webinar today, and so that we can hear your input on what topics we might wish to focus on in future active transportation resource center webinars. All right, that's a lot of words from me. With that, I'm done with our overview, and it's now time to turn it over to our first set of speakers, Corey Johnson and Becky Gilliam from the Safe Routes National Partnership. Corey, please.
Before we do that, we're going to hear from Caltrans. So Summer Anderson-Lopez is going to present.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for that catch.
Sure. Just 1 second.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see my screen?
We can. It looks great.
All right. I'm going to go into presentation mode here. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Summer Lopez. I work alongside the Active Transportation Program Non-Infrastructure Plans and Active Transportation Resource Center Program Manager, Emily Abrahams. Today, I'll be going over a newer process that we've recently developed to help agencies through their non-infrastructure and plan scope modifications. We hope that this will simplify the process a little bit and also help agencies begin to better understand your options as we move through the challenges of the pandemic together. Sorry, I'm trying to advance my slide. That's strange. It's not going forward. Oh, there we go. All right, so when the stay-at-home orders first began, Caltrans and CTC were initially recommending time extensions to non-infrastructure implementers, but as time went on, it became quite clear to us that time extensions were more of a less viable long-term solution. So, and with schools not reopening in the fall due to COVID-19, continuing their original scope would pose a risk for many communities. So it became clear to us that we needed to develop a newer process where agencies and Safe Routes to School implementers could still complete the original scopes, but with some different modifications that allow them to still meet the goals of their original scopes, but in a safer way. The newer process really is no different than what we usually do, but our goal is to be more flexible and to make it possible for agencies to open up their creativity to more out-of-the-box solutions. So as I said before, the process is basically the same as what we usually do for scope modifications. You can send your proposed 22-hour scope modifications to our shared inbox, which is that atp-ni@dot.ca.gov. We'll review your requests and treat them as a case-by-case basis. Please make sure that you're highlighting any changes in your 22-hour that you're making so that we can easily identify the changes. What we're really looking for is creativity in the modifications. We want your changes to be well thought out. We still want you to maintain elements of active transportation activities. And what we're really looking for is that your modifications still aim to meet that original intent of the scope that came along your that you submitted with your ATP application, your original ATP application. If you're having trouble with any modifications, or if you're not really sure what parts you need to change or even need some ideas, you can always schedule a call with us, Emily and myself, or we can also schedule a call with CDPH, and we can discuss your specific situation. Some examples of what these could look like may be Safe Routes to School programs shifting from in-person school assemblies to virtual assemblies. It could be in-person bike safety or repair courses, switch to online Zoom or recorded classes. It could be taking some in-person activities and creating videos to share with communities or with the schools. Those are just a few examples, and today's presentation is going to go over a lot more different examples and things that agencies and schools are already doing, and so that might give you some ideas too. As I stated before, we always want to see that you're including active transportation elements, especially if your original scope had some type of active transportation element in it already. Perhaps this could be sending school students out on an active transportation scavenger hunt with their immediate members of their household, or possibly still going on bike rides or walks, taking pictures, creating activities, etc. We really want to encourage your creativity with this. And of course, in the event that an agency must drastically adjust or change one or more activities or tasks in their scope, then we at Caltrans are able to work with you, the agency. We're able to work with district staff and actually formally process a scope change. So this is also still an option. And also you can still apply for time extensions as mentioned earlier, but we do recognize that there may be some more viable options than just a time extension or a formal scope change, and that's why we're becoming a little bit more flexible in this process. Lastly, just wanted to remind you that you can email us at this shared inbox, the ATP-NI inbox. You can also email Emily or myself individually, and we can help you with that. And of course, this is the link for your district ATP coordinators. You want to work with district staff as well, as we're all working together to process these modifications in your scopes. And I know that Victoria said we're waiting till the end for questions, so if you have any questions, just please hold off, or you can go into the chat and enter those, and we can answer them later. Thank you.
Becky Gilliam, and I work as a regional policy manager for the Safe Routes Partnership in the Pacific Northwest. I'm joining you today with my colleague, Corey Johnson. Corey, do you want to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Johnson, and I am the Program Support Manager at Safe Routes Partnership, and I am based in Washington, D.C.
Great. Thanks, Corey. Wonderful. So today we're going to be sharing with you all how we've been thinking about and planning for back to school this year, including an overview of our comprehensive back to school guide. So first, a little bit about who we are. The mission of the Safe Routes Partnership is to advance safe walking and rolling to and from schools and in everyday life, improving the health and well-being of people of all races, income levels, and abilities, and building healthy, thriving communities for everyone. So as we all know, some more than others, back to school is looking very different this year. It is new, and it's not what we knew even just a year ago or considered normal. At the Safe Routes Partnership, however, we recognize that normal is often defined by those with the most power, privileges, and access. It doesn't really reflect the rich diversity of our lived experiences and our struggles and our dreams for the future. So when we started thinking about our role in back to school planning, we were very conscious of the sense of urgency to return to normal. And we recognize that communities are at the heart of what we do, and our journey would be better made if we made it together. So this summer, we really hit a pause button from our everyday work, stuff that we do typically. And I mentioned earlier that I work as a policy manager in the Northwest. This summer, I had the chance to work with my colleague Corey and our technical assistance team to form a working group of Safe Routes to School practitioners and champions from across the country. So earlier this summer, we put out a call for applicants looking for folks who we think of as experts in the field. So thinking about Safe Routes to School and health practitioners, planners, teachers, parents. We received over 180 responses and had to narrow that down to 18. For 4 weeks, this group gathered on Zoom to share ideas, resources, strategies, and guidance that would help kids and families in our communities walk and roll this fall, whether we're heading back to the school building or learning at home. This group was led predominantly by women and people of color, and the group reflected and responded directly to the needs of communities most impacted by COVID-19. And our geographic diversity was also really strong. We had representation from 5 different time zones, spanning small mountain towns to our biggest coastal cities. So here I'm going to hand it over to Corey to talk a little bit more about the working group.
Thanks, Becky. So when we put together the working group, we really had, I guess, a few main objectives. So we wanted to make sure that we could develop strategies for implementing safe routes to school programs that could be done this fall, and that were very effective and easy to implement. So kind of take this resource and you can go and use it right away. And when we were working with the working group to put this together, we really thought about the different back to school scenarios different communities would be facing, knowing that there's a lot of diversity even within the 3 that we narrowed down. So we came up with strategies and recommendations around safe routes to school programs for remote learning, in-person learning, and then hybrid learning. So considering what does a safe routes to school program look like within each one of these scenarios, and we use those scenarios to build our resources and strategies that we have in the guide. Next slide. So when we were thinking about the framework that we wanted to use for our back-to-school strategies, we really centered it on the 6 E's of safe routes to school, which are engagement, equity, engineering, encouragement, education, and evaluation. And we chose this framework because it's something that's already familiar within the safe routes to school community. And just like with any safe routes to school program, maybe even more so in the case of implementing a program during COVID, we know that comprehensive approach is really important. So we wanted to make sure we could offer strategies and recommendations for each one of the E's. That way, there's a bit of something for everybody, and it is a really comprehensive approach to what safe routes to school can look like for students who are heading back to school this fall. Next slide. So we published our back to school guide at the end of July, I believe, and it is available for download on our website, and also the full guide. You can actually view it on our website. So there are lots of ways for people to connect with it and engage with it. It is a very extensive resource that it has great links to all the tools and resources that we put together. Becky and I will go through some of the highlights in a moment. But again, we spent a lot of time working on this with our working group, and are really pleased with how it came out. And it is now out there and available for you all to use as you need to. And I will also put the link to it in the chat box as well if any of you want to check it out. Afterwards, it's definitely a great resource. We should be able to find things in there that can help you all out in implementing your safe routes to school programs. Just a bit of information about how the guide is structured. So we include for each different scenario, so the remote learning, in-person learning, and hybrid learning, there are guiding recommendations, strategies, tools, considerations, and also advice for long-term planning. Knowing that COVID-19, it won't just go away as much as we would like for it to. It's something we're going to have to learn to live with and adapt to for a while. So we wanted to make sure that this is a resource that can exist beyond just this back to school time. We also wanted to make sure that the guide was structured to be short-term, actionable, and designed to adapt and modify to fit the unique needs of individual school districts and school communities. And so even within this guide, we encourage people to take resources and adapt them or use them to make sure that they fit the needs of your own school community. And I'm going to hand it over to Becky to talk about our first learning scenario, which was remote safe routes to school programming, and setting the stage for that.
Thanks, Corey. Great. So as Corey's mentioned, we're going to provide some context for each of these 3 scenarios, and then we'll give a few highlighted programming tips for each. We're not going to go through each scenario's recommendations because, as Corey has mentioned, it is a robust guide, so you can explore those on your own time, either downloading or clicking around on the website. So instead, I'll set the stage for how we're thinking about each model for Safe Routes to School programming. For remote learning, we know that even though students are not physically traveling to and from school, transportation and physical activity are still essential needs for families and students everywhere. And we really believe that Safe Routes to School programs have the opportunity to carve out new, non-traditional, and forward-thinking ways to support community health and safety and equitable transportation options in a remote learning environment. The abrupt shift to remote learning earlier this year really challenged schools and school-based programs to rapidly shift gears and adapt to an unprecedented new reality. So going into the fall, we've had some time to intentionally prepare and plan for this role of Safe Routes to School programs in helping families and communities to address the challenges that are presented by remote learning. So here are some ideas to give you a flavor for what remote learning might look like in the Safe Routes to School program. Again, walking through some of the 6 E's. For engagement, one thing that we wanted to highlight with you all is our partnership with Crossing Guards. Crossing Guards are essential partners in Safe Routes to School programs, and keeping them engaged and active in Safe Routes to School efforts is significant through this time. Many communities have a difficult time recruiting and retaining Crossing Guards, so it would be worthwhile to figure out how to keep them on the payroll. Offer self-paced continued learning opportunities. We had a working group member from Austin, Texas, who shared their experience of really great continued learning opportunities for Crossing Guards through COVID. And identify additional tasks and responsibilities to keep Crossing Guards engaged, such as conducting walk audits. For encouragement, this is a walk and roll activities calendar that Corey actually designed, and it's available as a Canva file so that you can actually modify it and update it for your own needs. So really thinking about offering a curated list and simple resource for parents and caregivers with ideas for setting family health and wellness goals for the whole family. And education, one idea that we have suggested is to partner with local libraries and community groups for online streaming and TV content. You may be able to find that there are already outlets in place for this kind of remote streaming that have an active audience. And thinking about equity, if you have not already done so, this could be an excellent time to go through your resources and get them translated into languages that are frequently spoken in your community. So using unused programming budget to hire an interpreter, translator, and increase future access to resources. Okay, switching into the second scenario, which is in person, we know that going back to school in person is not going to be the same experience as it was before COVID-19. Every aspect of the school day will change when students and staff start to return to buildings. And that begins with the trips to and from school. So Safe Routes to School programs have a crucial role to play when it comes to supporting community members in safely traveling to and from school in person. And more than ever, schools and families need safe, convenient routes for walking and biking as socially distant options for traveling around their community and getting that much needed physical activity, especially for families who don't feel safe riding the bus or don't own cars. Okay, going to go through a couple of E's for a flavor of in-person programming tips and strategies. For engineering, one thing that came out of the working group was the concept of experimenting with tactical urbanism projects and pop-ups to make changes in your community, especially if there may be less car traffic. That may be changing now, but that was an idea that came up through at least the fall when we've seen some street closures and the opportunity to activate crosswalks and sidewalks with creative artwork, working on temporary or permanent infrastructure installations, and incorporating positive health and safety messaging. For education, we've suggested to work with your school district to promote walking and biking to school as healthy, physically distant ways for kids to get to school. Incorporate school bus activities as well, or remote drop-off in Safe Routes to School education and encouragement programming. For example, we can be providing education on how to safely wait for and board the school bus with distancing measures in place. and disseminating existing Safe Routes to School maps to connect families that are accustomed to walking and biking with families that may be new to it. Parents and caregivers may view the suggestion coming from the district to be more credible than from Safe Routes to School advocates, something to keep in mind as well. For encouragement, if your community has closed streets or slowed traffic to create more room for people walking and biking at appropriate distances, try to promote those routes as routes to school using those streets. And for engineering, working with students to create wayfinding signage to encourage physical distancing, sharing reminders to wear PPE and ease congestion and confusion around drop-off and pickup. Wayfinding signs to classrooms may also alleviate the stress of having to navigate campus with COVID restrictions in place. Finally, we're going to move into hybrid learning model, and I will turn it back over to Corey.
Thanks, Becky. So for hybrid programming, we realized that a lot of districts are using this model, but they could even look different depending on your district or school. We know that these staggered schedules can present many challenges for families with students in different grades who are going to school on different days or at different times. So we understand this is a big struggle. And we also found that Safe Routes to School can really help connect families and community members to help with school travel, maybe teaming up with a neighbor or another trusted community member to make sure that you can navigate those hybrid schedules in a way that makes it a bit easier for everyone. Next slide. So one tip and strategy that we suggest is teaching young people how to use transit maps, read schedules, and put their bicycles on the bus rack. This is something that we think would be really helpful, especially for maybe some older students who might be using transit to get to school. We would recommend that for hybrid programming for education. For our next D, evaluation, we suggest surveying and talking with young people, parents, caregivers, teachers, and other partners to identify how the changes in school attendance days and times help or hurt people's ability to get around and meet their essential needs. So again, we know that dealing with these different schedules can be complicated, and oftentimes being able to have conversations with people either through a survey or even a phone conversation or even just getting on a Zoom call can help us better understand what people are going through so that we can help develop solutions that actually help them meet their essential need. And we consider transportation an essential need. And then finally, for encouragement, we have been encouraging people to use bike trains as a way to have a naturally physically distant travel mode for students on the days they're attending school in person. So, again, thinking back to connecting with community members and neighbors, finding a way to structure bike trains or even walking school bus programs on those days so students are going to school can help provide some structure, some community connectedness, and again, will help everybody all come together to work effectively and hopefully make it a bit less stressful or burdensome on an individual family or household. So those are just a few ideas for incorporating some hybrid resources and strategies into your Safe Routes to School program. And again, all of these are on the guide in the guide along with many other resources, strategies, and tools. In the chat box, I put a link to the guide. I put a link to the activities calendar that Becky shared. And I'll also put a link to our Safe Routes to School listserv, where a lot of our Safe Routes to School practitioners and champions have been sharing all kinds of great ideas and resources about getting your programs up and running during COVID. So I'll put a link in the chat box for that. Please feel free to sign up. That's another really wonderful resource. And people are doing amazing, great, innovative work in the midst of COVID. So definitely get connected with that group. And that's it for now. I know that we'll do some questions and answers at the end, so feel free to add them in the chat or ask us later. Again, I'm Corey, and thank you to my great colleague, Becky, and we look forward to chatting with you more in the Q&A section. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Corey and Becky. And in the interest of time, we're going to ask that Becky share the panelist icon with Noelle Mickelberry from Oregon Metro, who's our next presenter. All right, Noelle?
Great, thank you. I have the sharing capabilities. Can you all see my screen?
I can, it looks great.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Noelle Mickleberry. I use she, her pronouns, and I am Oregon Metro Safe Routes to School Program Coordinator. And I'm going to chat with you all today about our regional Safe Routes Back to School Toolkit that we created this summer. And really, it was kind of a next step after the great work of the National Partnership to dive deep into what strategies would work for us here regionally. Quick outline of what I'll be talking about today. I'm going to give a really brief overview of how Metro Safe Routes to School program works, a little bit of data from our Back to School Transportation Survey, and then some of the key strategies that came out of our Back to School Toolkit, as well as some implementation resources that we created for local programs, and then finally how to access some of these materials online. So really quickly, Metro is the Portland area's metropolitan planning organization. We serve 3 counties in the Portland, Oregon area, Washington, Multnomah, and Clackamas County. And we are a little bit unique as an MPO in that we have elected council members from 6 districts. So we manage a lot of the federal funds that come into the area for transportation. And Safe Routes to School was prioritized back in 2017 as a funding area, and so our regional Safe Routes to School program was created. So our structure is a little bit different than most local programs. We are primarily giving grants out to local programs, as well as providing technical assistance and regional coordination. And it's through those technical assistance and regional coordination parts of the program that we decided to develop this Back to School Toolkit. It was a specific request from our group of local practitioners to support their adaptation to the new school year that was coming up, and knowing that it would be different than normal. And just to share, in Oregon, all schools are still virtual. And we are working on getting to a 5% or less case positivity rate here in the state before schools do reopen. And so we're not there yet, and are likely still going to be virtual at least through the winter term. So what happened was we decided to put a survey out to families this summer to better understand what transportation needs, barriers, and ideas families would be responsive to, as well as better understand kind of the mode shift that we might see. And I think a big part of putting the survey out was to test our assumptions. I think we had thoughts of what program or what families might be concerned about, and we wanted to make sure that we were actually addressing the needs and concerns that were really out there. I'm just going to run through a couple of the results really quickly of what we heard from families. When we when we asked about challenges and concerns, not super surprising, but potential exposure to COVID-19 was far and away the biggest concern for families, but also concerns around social distancing on school buses and transit, as well as just school bus service changing, traffic changes around schools, et cetera. And we dug in a little bit more on some of these areas to better understand, ages of kids and which concerns were in different age groups as well. And then we also asked about transportation-related ideas that might be helpful for families. And, one of the top ones is that none of these ideas are of interest to my kids. And I think part of that came from the survey going out while school is entirely virtual, and many of the ideas were around when school returns in person. But it gave us some good insight as far as when school does return, which programs are more interesting to families. So using this, input from the survey and what we heard from coordinators around the region about challenges they were facing and ideas they had, we put together a back-to-school toolkit and structured slightly different from the national guide. We broke it up into remote learning strategies, school commute strategies, which are really around when school returns, and then messaging strategies. And the areas that are starred are the ones I'm just going to walk through really quickly and share a little bit more detail about. And they're also the ones that were most popular in both our survey and with coordinators and school administrators as well. And really quickly, the way we laid out each strategy, they all include kind of a brief detail of the concept itself, why you might use this strategy, specific considerations that you should take into account when implementing this strategy. And this is where we really tried to include those health and safety practices with the most recent, guidance that we had at the time, how to integrate equity and inclusion into this strategy, as well as cost and material needs that might come up. We also included partnerships, ways to incorporate education and encouragement, and then on most of them, a big list of resources, which were a lot sourced from the National Partnerships Resource List and other local programs. So just going to run through a few examples of what's included in each of these areas that were seen as the most popular. Under remote learning strategies, educational strategies, we include lesson plans, activity books and worksheets, wiggle breaks, and safe routes to school story time. Both wiggle breaks and story time have been most popular with teachers and administrators, particularly because it gets kids away from the screen for a little while, which we're learning now that school started up that screen time can be a little intense, especially for younger kids. Walking and rolling strategies, adaptations to walking school buses and bike trains, corner greeters, a safe passage program to really help kids feel safe on their route to school, secure bike and scooters parking, and park and walk. And from our survey, the walking school buses and park and walk were two of the more popular ideas that came out of that. And then pop-up design pilots. This is where we really dig into the streetscape changes and how to support kids and families when school returns, and there may be, again, changes to school bus service. More kids may be being driven to school, and how to really support all students in their trip to school. And school streets was a popular one with in the survey, and then traffic playgrounds and play spaces have become a super interesting and popular item here in the Portland metro region. I'm just going to talk about them really quickly. We were actually simultaneously creating a traffic playground toolkit for the region for more permanent installation. And what happened, though, is these temporary and pop-up playgrounds have really taken off. We have, I think, 16 now in the metro region at parks, housing complexes, and school playgrounds. They've come up, and kids are using them or use them all throughout the summer as well. We just have a couple photos here. An example of a traffic playground at a local school that the Portland Bureau of Transportation installed. And then here's a temporary play space that was fit in an area that didn't have quite enough space for a full traffic playground, but we wanted to create more spaces for kids to play, especially in places where parks and green spaces and traditional playgrounds aren't as accessible. And then finally, our messaging strategies section of the toolkit, kind of going off of what Becky and Corey were discussing, the COVID-19 crisis has really impacted different communities in different ways, and as we wanted to create messaging lenses that take that into consideration when communicating with families about school returning or activities or programming that's coming up. And I wanted to talk really quickly about our incorporation of anti-hate messaging. When we put our survey out, one of the questions we included was, what are your concerns going back to school? And we included hate or harassment based on race, ethnicity, or gender identity. And in the results, 16% of families with children of color noted that as a concern, and that increased for both families with Asian or Asian American children and families with Black children to levels that to me are very concerning and something that we really need to incorporate into our programming to ensure that all kids feel safe walking to school. And these are a couple of graphs from a local organization called Portland United Against Hate that's been tracking hate incidents in the Portland metro area and just showing that more than nationally here in the Portland area, hate incidents happen on our streets and sidewalks, and folks under the age of 18 are the largest reporting group. So to me, this is a really big priority for our local Safe Routes to School programs and how to incorporate this into how we deliver our programs and communicate and interact with families. And finally, we put together some implementation resources, and these are things that I hope are useful both, here in the metro area and of course for anyone that wants to use these. We have a collaboration site on Basecamp, and I'll share the link in the chat how to access these materials. But we have all of these available online, and I'll walk through a couple of them here. So we put together this editable walk and roll map that's really aimed at incorporating some of the strategies that we included in our toolkit. So this is actually a Word document that is fully editable, and it includes this map key that has little design elements for some of the different strategies like school streets, crossing guards or corner greeters, more bike and scooter parking, et cetera, that you can incorporate all into one map, especially when school returns. If there's a lot of new things going on, this could be a tool that could be used to help share that information with families. And we wanted to make it in a Word doc so it was really easy to access. And then we also, the request of local coordinators, put together these grab-and-go conversation sheets. And these are, again, Word docs that incorporate information about different strategies and allow for coordinators to kind of pull this out of the toolkit and hand to a principal or a school administrator as an idea, instead of bringing the kind of really massive toolkit as a whole, and give folks a little glimpse at what some of these strategies might look like. There's space on there to include your own logo, and you can edit any of the text, but we just wanted to kind of give people a template of how to bring these strategies into conversations with schools and school staff. And then the next step, I'm working on developing funding and supplies and contract services that help with the implementation of these strategies. We're going to have a program support fund that's specifically dedicated to back to school programs. It'll be up to $5,000 per applicant, and this is really for larger programs or projects like installation of bike parking, stipends for program leaders, et cetera. And then we're also looking at purchasing supplies for specific strategy implementation, such as PPE for program leaders, paint and supplies for traffic playgrounds, and other items that programs around the region can borrow and share amongst themselves to implement these strategies, really to help reduce sort of the administrative burden of local programs having to go out and find these supplies themselves. And then lastly, contract services for programs to access. As Corey and Becky mentioned, I think it's a really important time to prioritize translation and interpretation. And so we'll have a contract for the whole region that local programs can access to quickly and easily translate materials. We're looking at videography to create some of those educational materials, and then temporary bike parking as well, so that we have all those. We kind of do all the administrative back end here at Metro, so that local programs can just access those resources and move quickly to implement strategies. So they're all underway, hoping to have those resources available by the beginning of 2021. And everything's available online, all on our website, oregonmetro.gov/saferoutes. I'll put a few specific links in the chat, and I think Marianne is also going to send out a resource list. And also feel free to email me with any questions, or if you want to access materials, can't find them, happy to share. And yeah, I hope this is useful outside our metro region as well. So thanks so much for having me, and looking forward to the Q&A as well if there are questions I can answer.
Fantastic. Noelle, that was excellent and so useful, and we're so grateful here in California that you were able to join us this morning and share what you've been doing in the Oregon Metro, under Oregon Metro. So thank you, and let's, in the interest of time, move on to our next speaker. Jenny is going to have her slides, I believe, by Marianne.
By Marianne. Noelle, can you pass me the controls, please?
Yes, I'm looking for how to do that. If someone could let me know.
A little circle near your name. You drag it towards mine. I think I can do it. I'm trying to.
This is Becky. Last time I just hovered over the next presenter's name and it gave me the option.
So that would be Marianne. Yeah.
Okay, I think I passed it to Jenny.
Right, but I'm going to be showing her slides, so I need to be the host. Marianne.
Apologies. I think Jenny has to pass it to you now.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I will make you the presenter.
Thank you. I'm going to share your slides. Just 1 second. Let me pull them up. Okay, 1 second. Sorry, my screen is very busy. Alrighty, just 1 second. Okay. Can everybody see Jenny's slides?
Nope, I can't see them.
Okay. Let me go back. 1 second.
There we go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's not the first slide.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, I'll get started talking. I do hear a little bit of a delay, though. I'm not sure why. Okay, my name's Jenny White. I'm a projects coordinator for the Natural Resources Services Division of Redwood Community Action Agency in Eureka, California. And you can just keep it. Oh.
Okay.
You can keep it on that camera slide. Anyway, we'll just keep it here. So I'm talking to you from Eureka, California. Redwood Community Action Agency is a nonprofit organization that provides services to low and moderate income residents in Humboldt County. And our long-term goal is developing programs that help people become self-sufficient and empowered to improve their own lives. The Natural Resources Services Division is committed to improving community health. And we've been working on state projects in Humboldt County for more than a decade now. And so this slide just shows you Humboldt County and throughout was part of the state, just a one county separating us from the Oregon border, which is Humboldt County. This is a really beautiful area, a beautiful tourist destination. It's home to Redwood National Park. We're quite rural. We have an area of over 400 square miles. And our county-wide population is 135,000 residents. Our main population centers are located around Humboldt Bay, which is Wiyot ancestral territory. And the cities of Eureka and Arcata have about 45,000 residents located on Humboldt Bay. Eureka is the county seat, which is on the south end of Humboldt Bay. And it's about 280 miles or 5 hours north of San Francisco by car. We have 7 incorporated cities and 8 tribal nations, and the rest of the region is unincorporated. So we have a real mild climate, but very wet winters, cool, foggy summers. And because we have a real big range of elevation from the coast to the King Range at 4,000 feet, there's a real variety of weather. And as you can imagine, we have a lot of remote communities that are tucked away in the hills. Next slide. So, we're really spread out here in Humboldt County. Go ahead, and if you can advance my slide, Marianne. We have 90 schools in 32 different districts. And there are a lot of different settings. I'm still not, oh, there we go. There we go. Some schools are in neighborhoods and towns or cities that are walkable and bikeable, but there's a lot of communities with schools that are in far-off reaches of the county, and so we have limited walking and biking infrastructure, especially outside of city limits, and that does make encouraging active transportation challenging at times. Next slide. So here in Humboldt County, 66% of kids are driven to school by car, not unlike other rural communities. A lot of schools are located far from where students live, and there's bad weather, lack of infrastructure. Some areas have really windy, remote rural roads with bad motorist visibility, and these are all very typical barriers to kids walking and biking to school. And being a rural region, we also tend to have a car culture. A lot of people support the idea of walking and biking, but we have rural tendencies, and not everyone feels that sidewalks and lighting and other necessities for walking and biking are appropriate in all of its communities. Next slide, please. That being said, we've had a lot of support for safe routes to school and a lot of successes here over the last decade. Just real quick, I want to talk about some of those things. About 8 years ago, we developed rural prioritization metrics to help our local jurisdictions determine which schools have the greatest need and capacity for safe routes to school programs. And the tool has really helped us be more competitive for safe routes to school, ATP, and other similar funding sources by showing the funders that we're on the same page as far as which schools have the need and are ready to sustain safe routes programs. And so as a result, we've received a lot of ATP grants here in the county, both for infrastructure and non-infrastructure, and it's really changed our landscape and taught kids in the community ways to increase their activity levels and improve their health. So for non-infrastructure activities, we've had district-wide pedestrian and bike safety workshops and bike rodeos. We've done numerous walkability workshops and assessments and created reports, map development, walking maps, arrival and dismissal maps. We've built a lot of new trails in the last decade. We provide support and encouragement for walk and roll events, and we've developed bike clubs at local schools, and we formed a county-wide Safe Routes to School task force to help guide programs and kind of spread the reach of safe routes throughout the county. And we've also worked on policy change, including school zone speed reduction efforts, where the speed limit is now 15 miles an hour at most schools. Next slide. Okay, so here's the juice. We've been celebrating these many wins. You can switch to the next slide, please. The coronavirus, when it struck in March, our schools shut down and it was chaotic and paralyzing. And the schools we were working with, had these unimaginable challenges in front of them. And it left us wondering, how are we going to keep being able to do this work? And like many of you, I was working very closely with people from our county public health department on projects that we were contracted to work on with them. And they're also our thinking partners for safe routes and active transportation projects. And, you know, they got pulled away overnight, those public health partners. You know, they were pulled away to, you know, focus on the COVID emergency, and they were suddenly not available to help work on these safe routes projects. And so it really did leave me feeling confused and isolated, I'm sure, like a lot of you. And, you know, finally we realized that schools were not going to be reopening soon, and much of our work is going to be put on hold. Next slide, please. And so I've been preparing for a countywide Safe Routes to School task force meeting in March. Obviously, it had to be canceled. We couldn't meet. We didn't know when we'd be able to meet again, so I developed an electronic Safe Routes to School and active transportation newsletter. You know, this was a way to kind of keep sharing relevant information, keep Safe Routes to School momentum moving forward during these times. So for the past, you know, 6 months, I sent out these newsletters as a way to connect with our task force members, as well as, you know, school administrators and teachers and city staff and elected officials and everyone doing this work, so that they could stay abreast of the issues and concerns around walking and biking. And so this way, even though we weren't meeting, there was a Safe Routes to School presence in our county. And I have received email responses to the e-news each month, which is great. It's been a nice way to continue networking during the pandemic. At the bottom is a link to the Humboldt County Safe Routes to School webpage that has these newsletters archived. Next slide. Okay, so in March, I was actively working on 4 different ATP projects, and obviously some needed to be postponed until we knew more about the virus, and it was pretty obvious which ones would be safe to continue working on and which needed to be modified. And so the grant managers in the cities I was working with were able to get extensions on their ATP projects to give us more time to figure out how to proceed. We knew it wasn't feasible to continue working with students on the projects we'd started, but we didn't want to stop the projects altogether and lose the momentum. So after a couple months, I decided to reevaluate and revise the portions of my scopes of work that were feasible. You know, all the in-school and classroom projects had to be canceled. Walk and roll events and in-classroom lessons had to be canceled. I spoke with a lot of teacher friends that I have to find out how to keep providing education, and it was suggested that I revise my lessons into video demonstrations to share with classes. So that's one thing that I'm working on, is developing ped and bike safety lessons that include local streets and relatable content for each individual school I'm working with. And then some of my projects, they already had in their scope of work the development of pedestrian and bicycle route maps. So I've been able to continue working on those remotely. These walking maps and arrival and dismissal maps and, you know, just pedestrian and bike route maps in general are really excellent tools for communities to increase the number of people using active transportation. You know, when people know the procedures, or they know the walking or biking distance or the time or the, you know, trail terrain, it helps people feel more comfortable making the choice to walk or bike. And so I really do encourage you who have not worked on maps like this as a tool to consider doing so at this time. It can be a really effective and COVID-friendly project or project component that helps improve safety and increases walking and biking. Next slide, please. My public health partners and I have been working with middle schools on developing a remote drop-off program for their school when everything came to a halt. So I no longer had access to the students or the teacher, and I also knew that the teachers and administrators were overwhelmed and obviously had a lot on their plate. So I was really conscious of not wanting to bug them too much. So the work promoting active transportation, it wasn't an emergency like COVID, but ironically, being outdoors and staying active have been key strategies for preventing the virus and maintaining mental health during this challenging time. You know, it's unlike anything we've known or experienced before. So I started creating some safety information sheets. It was sort of like a safety campaign to kind of share this information with schools. Again, I didn't want to, you know, bother the principals or teachers too much, but I was really trying to keep moving this work forward, especially because it just seems so important as a way for kids to get physical activity and maintain their mental health. So fortunately, the principals at the schools I've been working with were really supportive, and they did share these safety information sheets that I was creating weekly They shared them with the student body via Facebook and Google Classrooms and Class Dojo. They really did understand the importance of encouraging physical activity during this time. Next slide. So it started becoming even more obvious that promoting active transportation was relevant. Again, even more so because during the quarantine, people really started feeling cooped up, and we started seeing a lot more kids and families outside walking and biking on trails and local streets. So, you know, our work wasn't done. It was just different. It was a time for reflection and reassessing community needs and really trying to help in whatever way we could by being creative and continuing to work on tasks that could be moved forward. So another one of the active ATP projects I was working on at the time had in its scope of work the installation of 2 permanent bike skills courses at 2 different parks. So even though our public health partners were pulled away from Safe Routes projects, this was something that I could help finish. So I worked with their other contractor and a thinking partner of mine, Melanie Williams of bikesfair.com, to continue that effort because supporting safe biking was definitely something that we felt not only needed to continue during COVID, but it could be continued. So we reached out to our public works and parks partners and made sure that we did continue that effort. So the county installed striped yellow lines in the parking lot of Hiller Park in McKinleyville. They used permanent yellow paint, which is differentiated from the parking lines, which are done in white paint. We'd also been working on the development of a skills course sign that would accompany the course and explain in English and Spanish how to use the course safely. And so the county is currently working on installing the sign in McKinleyville, as well as another course and sign in the city of Fortuna. And this is really exciting because a permanent skills course is exactly the type of tool that's perfect in the COVID age. Kids and adults can practice their skills outdoors in fresh air on their own time. We have had 2 permanent bike skills courses installed locally in recent years, but they're both at schools, one at a middle school and another at an elementary school. So those aren't open to the public. So these 2 new skills courses are a real welcome addition to our community. And I have been on my bike out to the park, and I've seen kids and families already using the course, which is just awesome. My colleague, Melanie Williams of Bikes There, also recently evaluated all the potential sites and needs for permanent bike skills courses here in Humboldt County. She created this report, which can be found at the link here at the bottom of the slide, and it might be helpful, you know, for those of you considering this strategy to help keep bike safety education happening during this time. Next slide. So as schools and districts started meeting to talk about whether or not schools would be able to reopen in the spring or even continue in-person teaching in the fall, the realization that school transportation would be seriously impacted by COVID-19 really began to sink in. So I started participating in countywide school transportation manager meetings via Zoom. And I learned that with social distancing guidance or social distancing requirements, you know, schools could only transport 24 kids on an 80-passenger bus. And so that was really seeming like a big barrier. So it just seemed like a great job for a walking school bus. And so I suggested in the meeting to expand the walk boundaries where students live, you know, if they're close enough, and create walking school buses instead. And the idea was well received by the transportation managers, especially the ones that had it on their routes, groups of kids who lived in neighborhoods that were near each other that rode the bus because of maybe one busy or tricky street that kids needed to be able to cross safely. So they were really interested in this. So I was asked by a bus driver if we had any walking school bus information that included COVID compliant guidelines. And so I started looking around and I couldn't find anything. And so I just assumed they didn't really exist yet. So I got busy. I reached out to, again, my colleague and thinking partner, Melanie Williams of Bikes There, for ideas. And with her sharp mind and my graphic skills, we were able to put together a publication for schools and districts around walking school buses during COVID. So I started with guidelines that were developed by the National Center for Safe Route to School, and then with Melanie's help, we revised the information to make it relevant and useful to our local community. And so, of course, we created it with COVID-19 in mind, so we developed guidelines about how students and walking school bus drivers, if they're, school staff or volunteers, so that everyone would stay safe during the pandemic. We wanted to make sure that it was helpful and that it included details like thinking about if the walking school bus would be in the morning or the afternoon or both. And, if it was just going to be in the morning, then coordinators would need to think about how to make sure students would get home in the afternoon safely. So we we suggested that people, include an example of what a schedule might look like. So we put that in there. And then with the exception of a few schools, our local schools mostly started with distance learning this year in Humboldt County. But now we are a little more prepared, having created this document for when schools go back to in-person learning. And this document is also available for use for anyone who'd like. It's at the link, and they'll be sending out the resources following the presentation. Next slide, please. So most students are, like I said, participating in distance learning here in our county, but several of our schools have recently reopened for in-person learning. And so even though some have reopened, we've still not been able to host things like walk or bike to school day events like we used to. The schools are just not yet able to have extracurricular events or even extra volunteers on campus. So I've been sending information electronically to schools about how to stay safe walking and biking to school while taking COVID social distancing precautions. I just felt it was really important to provide this information in advance of the students returning to school campuses in person. And I did find this really great resource at King County Metro in Seattle on walk and roll with your family while social distancing. And I just adapted it to include some relevant information in our area. And I just was hoping that kids would participate in International Walk to School Day because we've had a really great time in the past, but in the past we've gathered and walked as a group, and we weren't able to meet and walk together this year. So many students just walked to school with their families. Next slide. So in September, as many of you know, the ATP deadline for Cycle 5 applications were due, and so my coworker and I were contracted by 2 local jurisdictions to help with 2 different ATP grant applications this summer. So we compiled data and wrote narratives for the grant applications, which, if funded, would develop 2 segments of the Annie and Mary Trail, which has been a community priority for over 2 decades. And so just proactively grant writing and looking forward to new trails was excellent therapy. Next slide. So there's a lot of new stuff going on, a lot of resources out there, a lot of unknowns. One of my ATP projects, I was supposed to coordinate a bike rodeo at an elementary school. And when I reevaluated and altered my scope of work and adjusted the tasks to be COVID compliant, I honestly could not think of an activity that would replace an in-person bike rodeo. And I still can't. So I postponed that bike rodeo until next spring. Obviously, we still don't know if an event like that will be permitted. But now I have an ask of all of you. If anyone has any ideas as to a COVID-safe learning or encouragement activity that would be a good substitution for a bike rodeo, please let me know. That would be awesome. Next slide. All right, so none of us have all of the answers, but this has really been an opportunity to slow down and assess our community's needs. Evaluation is a Safe Routes to School E that I just hadn't really been taking into consideration much lately, so this has all been very timely. COVID has been and will continue to present obstacles and opportunities, so we really just have to allow ourselves to be open to new ideas and strategies. And I'm hoping to have more opportunities just like this webinar to network with others in the coming months to strategize and share resources. So that concludes my presentation. Next slide is yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm going to go ahead and pass control over to Vanessa.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I'm hearing that echo again. Okay, let me go into presentation mode. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. My name is Vanessa Castro, and I am the project specialist for the San Mateo County Office of Education, focusing on safe routes to school. And I'm going to be presenting today with my colleague, Teresa Valles-Kelly, who is the countywide coordinator of our Safe Routes to School program. And just a brief overview of what we're going to be sharing today. We are going to be focusing on our implementation of Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, particularly with the focus of, I guess, launching it nationwide during a pandemic. And also just going to go over some of the other adaptations that we've done since March, with particular focus on our virtual walk audit and engineering work that we started over the summer and are still working on. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Teresa.
Hi, everybody. So this is just a picture of our Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day timeline. So I'm sure you all know the story about Ruby Bridges. She was a 6-year-old African-American girl who integrated her school actually 60 years ago, this November 14th. And she showed up for school every day escorted by federal marshals, and it changed the course of education for the nation. In May of 2018, a group of 5th graders from South San Francisco, California, were learning about Ruby Bridges, and one of them asked the question, is there a Ruby Bridges Day? And after they did some, yes, so can you mute your mic? I can hear some background.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's okay. So they did some research, and they found out that there is not a Ruby Bridges Day. So they proposed to their school board to make November 14th Ruby Bridges Day in the South San Francisco Unified School District. I happened to be at that school board meeting, and as I was listening to them talk about this, and they were so inspired by Ruby, I was inspired by them, that I was thinking this would make an awesome walk to school day. So I met with the teacher and the students, and the first Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day was held on November 14th, 2018. This year, we're celebrating the 3rd annual Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, and we are hoping for participation across the country. And we already have some signups, which we'll show you a map in a couple of minutes. But if you want more information about Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, and we'll show you the website, but the web address is at the bottom, tinyurl.com/RubyBridgesWalk. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the website. And this is our homepage, so you see the timeline on the homepage. We also have a song that you can see at the top of the page that was written specifically for this. You'll hear a little bit of the song in a video that we're going to show you, but it was written specifically for this day. And if you go, Vanessa, to the resources page. Thank you. So we have resources on this page for teachers or parents who want to teach their children about Ruby Bridges. Some lesson plans. We have templates for board resolutions, social media posts, media release templates, a template for a bookmark that we're giving out this year if anybody wants to order their own bookmarks, and then the timeline that I just showed you. And then these are the 2 posters from the first year and the second year. The poster for this year, we are very close to having it finalized, and we will put it on the website as soon as it's ready. Next. Thank you. So many people think that what Ruby Bridges did happened a long, long time ago, but it didn't happen that long ago. It was only 60 years ago. Ruby Bridges is alive and well, and the students who helped start this day got to meet her in January in Sacramento where she was speaking, and it was a really exciting moment for them. And this is our Walk With Us page. So this page just gives you a little bit of background about how this Walk to School Day began. There are some videos and articles about the creation of Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. And then there's a way for you to sign up so that we can track participation across the country. So if you scroll down, Vanessa, to the bottom of the page. So far, we have a lot of schools in the Bay Area that have signed up, but we also have some participation from Connecticut, Colorado, Arizona, and Virginia. And we're hoping to fill this map. So if you're interested, we really hope that you will sign your schools up. Can you scroll up a little bit, Vanessa? So we do have some COVID-19 considerations. So here in the Bay Area, school is not meeting in the school buildings right now. So we are still encouraging teachers to teach about Ruby Bridges and then encourage their students to take a walk with their families on November 14th, which is a Saturday. So this year, Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, if it were a regular year, would be on November 18th. But to take a walk with their families and think about Ruby's courage and the power that children can have towards positive change. And then if school is in session on a hybrid model, to just pick a day, like a couple of different days where students can walk to school and learn about Ruby and then walk to school, just really honoring her courage, and that walk for justice continues. The walk for justice in education definitely continues. And I think that this day is really relevant right now with everything going on in our country. This is a way for students to also get involved and really show their support for this little girl's courage 60 years ago, and that they also can show their support by walking. And then can you scroll down to the, oh, okay, never mind. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so these are photos from past Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, and we will definitely update them with photos for this year as well. So we just wanted to end this portion of our presentation, and next we're going to get into what we've been doing since COVID happened, but we're going to end with a video. So that's on the next slide, Vanessa.
Okay. So
this is our Ruby Bridges promo video.
And let me know if there's trouble with the audio.
Yeah, I can't hear it.
Yeah. No audio?
No, no audio. Well, you know what? We're going to go on just in the interest of time. But you can go to the website and you can view this video. It's about 2 minutes long, and it includes it's a promotional video for Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. So we'll just go on to the next slide. Okay, so once COVID hit back in, and we all were on shelter in place, we were trying to figure out ways, like all of you, on how to engage with students. So one of the things that we did was we had a safety patrol Zoom, and many of the students that go to Martin Elementary School in South San Francisco, which is the school that started Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, they are also safety patrollers, and they are part of an award-winning safety patrol. And we had them pair up with a safety patrol that is also very good, but newer. And they were able to meet over Zoom, 2 different school districts able to meet over Zoom and share best practices. And that was a really great way to engage students and to engage with safety patrol and talk about like how they could still be safety patrollers in their neighborhood as their schools weren't, even though their schools were not in session. Next slide. Another thing that we were trying to think about is how do we get information to students because they're not in school, so what are we going to do? So we found out that many of the school districts that we were working with sponsored food banks for their families, monthly food banks. So we were able to partner with some of our school districts and go to the food bank, and when the parents picked up their boxes of food, we were able to give Safe Routes to School activity kits as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa.
Thank you, Teresa. So I'm going to briefly share some of the, changes that we made once the pandemic hit and we went into shelter in place. One of the very first actions we took was to create this. We at first called it the Safe Routes During Shelter in Place website, but now it's kind of transitioned into Safe Routes to Anywhere because we want to encourage families and students and community members to still walk and bike and be safe while doing so, even though they're not necessarily traveling to school at the moment. So you see the tiny URL there at the bottom. Feel free to visit. There are a lot of resources, activities that kids and teachers and families can take part in. So I definitely want to encourage you all to take a look at that website. And then again, some of the early adaptations that we did, a lot of people have already talked about story time. We started doing that back in March. We've continued it into the school year, and it's gotten more and more popular, I think, as people kind of became more familiar with it. So that's been a really fun success, and really it's been a good challenge trying to find books that really relate to safe routes to school messaging and walking and biking to school. We also promoted a teddy bear challenge last spring, especially when this was still very new and people were very unsure about how to proceed or how long this was going to happen. We helped promote the teddy bear challenge, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. It went viral. It was trending in the news for a while, in which families put out teddy bears and kids could go on a teddy bear hunt and count how many they saw. So we promoted that. And what I really want to highlight about this is that we actually collaborated with a local newspaper to buy full-page ads to promote these kind of events and activities. So we had the teddy bear challenge, I guess, full-page ad in which kids could like paint their own teddy bear and like either tape it up to the window if they didn't have a teddy bear, or just partake in this activity even if they didn't have like a street-facing window. And more recently, we also put out a Walk to Anywhere Week ad, which is the week that would have been International Walk to School Day. And yeah, we just had kids submit their artwork, and it was really a lot of fun to see how creative people got with it. So these are just two examples of some of the really great submissions we received. And I really want to focus on our work that we did, I guess, to work with our city engineers throughout the county to really talk about supporting back-to-school travel during COVID-19. Granted, we did have this conversation over the summer when we thought school would be back in session for the fall. However, it did really bring up a lot of great conversations around school streets and closing those school-adjacent streets. A lot of our cities did lean into street closures, but it was mostly focused in downtown districts. We really wanted that conversation to extend to schools and to support school travel that allowed for active transportation while maintaining social distance. And from that meeting, we actually kind of, it was a natural partnership, but we worked with an elementary school, Sunshine Gardens Elementary in South San Francisco, to pilot this idea of a virtual walk audit. We really wanted to kind of continue that conversation, and we thought this school would be a really good place to pilot that because we had support from the city, we had support from the school principal and administration. So we teamed up with Mark Benton, a national public health and transportation consultant, and Ann Banshoff, who works with Stanford University's Our Voice program, which is an app-based citizen science program that really allows community members and neighbors to pinpoint barriers in their neighborhood. And in this particular project, it was barriers to walking and biking. So we used Mark's framework of the 3 Ps, which focused on, programmatic implementation, physical projects that we could look into, and policies that would eventually shift cultures to support walking and biking to school. So it was a really great session. We actually had 2 sessions, a couple of training sessions, one in English, one in Spanish, and then a third session in which we brought together all the participants after they have walked their community. The image you see on the screen is actually the geotagged photos that people took using the Discovery Tool app, which is Our Voice's, I guess it's their tool for collecting information and collecting the data. We had over 300 photos submitted, which was amazing because we had such good, engagement from the community, right? So from these photos, we had 8 themes that were identified: sidewalk and pathway conditions, crossings and crosswalks, vehicle behaviors, general safety, bike accommodations, traffic signs, lights and controls, sidewalk connectivity, and vehicle speed. So by focusing on these 8 themes, we were able to kind of break our participants into small groups in which they discussed certain themes with that framework of the 3 Ps. So we finished our kind of first session, the walk audit itself. That was a really big success, and we're ready to move into like the next phase where we actually implement some of these projects and programs. One of the projects that we're kind of discussing right now does include learning hubs that support families that have limited access or unreliable access to internet, and partnering with local service providers to provide bike skills training. So that's just one example of the kinds of projects that we're leaning towards right now. And we're just really excited to see where this work goes. And that's it for us today. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for inviting us to speak.
That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Vanessa and Therese. That was wonderful. And I'm amazed to see that we are actually not that far off of our internal time agenda. So we're going to spend about the next 20 minutes or so taking any questions from our attendees. And I know that we have a few to begin with. So as Marianne puts up our conclusion slides that have the instructions for our question and answer session, I'll start by reading through some chat and asking some of the questions that we know have come in already. So Vanessa, the first question is for you. I know you spoke about the reading list for the storytime materials. Is that reading list available? Is it something that can be shared with our attendees post-webinar?
Hi, yeah, I was actually typing my answer in the chat, but I'm happy to speak to that a little bit. We don't have a list ready to go, but we can compile a list and send it to you to send out to attendees. And I should add too, we have kind of gotten a little creative with how we share the message of Safe Routes to School in literature. One example, which was actually one of our most popular storytime sessions, was Harry Potter. We read an excerpt from the first book in which students were learning to ride their brooms, and we made the connection to how it's similar to learning to ride a bike. So I'm happy to share what we've read so far and what we're planning on reading.
And we also have the slide decks for all of our story times, which if we can figure out a way to share that, we can share those. I guess we could put them all in a Google Drive and then just share the link. So they'll be ready and you can download them and change them up as you would want to.
Fantastic. I know there's a lot of interest in that. And Noelle is sharing through the chat that she also has a list of Safe Routes to School storytime materials from the Oregon Metro Safe Routes to School Back to School Toolkit, and that's on page 13. So that's exciting. And since I have Noelle here on in the chat, I'll ask her to unmute herself and answer a question that we had, our Active Transportation Resource Center team had, which was about the trauma-informed messaging component of the toolkit. I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit of an overview and how that came about and some of the resources that you selected to include in the toolkit. So I believe, Noelle, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. So the trauma-informed messaging, it's page 55 in the toolkit. And we, I think it's been discussed from most of the presenters that we know families are navigating a lot with the pandemic, everything from food insecurity, grief and loss, as well as, limited social interaction and, all of that layered on each other. And so we really felt like it was important to include a trauma-informed approach to messaging. Walking and biking and being outside are a great tool for navigating challenging times, but we also want to be sensitive to those barriers and not kind of communicating as we normally would. So in this strategy, it includes kind of some of the components of a trauma-informed approach, which are, things like establishing routine, movement and mindfulness, maintaining social connection, talking about worries and concerns, focusing on strengths. And then we kind of include a few examples of how you might use those components to message about safe routes to school. And we try to incorporate, we have this specific messaging section in the toolkit, but we try to incorporate that lens into a lot of the other strategy descriptions to make sure that folks, when they're implementing these, are thinking about, how are families going to receive this information, how might they be involved, and how to, consider those factors that may be impacting their ability to participate.
Thank you so much, Noella. We just wanted to call that out because we know that it's been coming up in a number of different discussions as we see this, our Safe Routes to School work kind of dovetailing with broader violence prevention efforts and childhood essential efforts that are taking place throughout the state of California. So I really appreciate that. So I want to encourage everyone to use the chat function to ask your questions, and I want to actually ask the next question of Corey and Becky, if they're available to unmute themselves. So we know that the partnership has been positing engagement as one of the key E's in building safe routes to school, so engagement. And having gone through the toolkit, we've seen a lot of new engagement strategies. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the tools that are in that some of the resources that you've come across to enhance engagement, and wanted to also ask you about Safe Routes community engagement cards, what they are and where we might be able to find them.
Yeah, I can take that one. So yes, as you mentioned, we are kind of refocusing so I guess back in June, we decided to remove enforcement from the 6 E's of Safe Routes to School and refocus around authentic and equitable community engagement. And so as a team, we've been doing a lot of work to, again, center our work on community engagement and provide resources and start exploring, like what that looks like and what that actually means. So within the context of the guide, like some of the things we already mentioned in our presentation, like different, activities calendars or ways to connect with different communities, like virtually, like doing some more, Zoom surveys or Zoom calls as opposed to some of the in-person engagements that we're used to doing. The community engagement cards, which are also referenced in the guide, actually put those together a few years ago. My first 2 years of the partnership, I was running community engagement programs here in DC, and so I put together a series of community engagement activities that can be adapted to fit in any community. So these were, again, created pre-COVID, so most of them are for in-person activities. They can definitely be adapted for both a virtual or physically distanced setting. So I can include those in the chat box as well. And also moving forward, as I mentioned, we're still exploring what community engagement looks like for us at the partnership and for Safe Routes to School programs. So I would stay tuned for early 2021. We'll have some upcoming trainings all about community engagement, which will be very interesting and creative, and I can definitely share information about that when it becomes available. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, I will put the community engagement cards here in the chat box if you want to check those out too. And a lot of the community engagement cards are, include a lot of arts-based community engagement ideas and, just like different activities that can work across lots of different communities that can be done in a safe, creative way, both in person and virtually.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Corey. We appreciate having those resources, and I think that is an essential element moving forward. How can we do authentic engagement? And I think different tools can just give us more inspiration and encouragement to move forward with that process. So appreciate that. I have another question that's come in from our team, our Active Transportation Resource Center team. So with COVID happening, have you found yourselves, this is really for everyone, and so we'll figure out how we can have each of you speak to this, but have you found yourselves engaging new partners for your work, and if so, who are they, and when, and how have those partners enhanced what you're able to do during these challenging times? So it's a little broad, but maybe each of you could think about a new partner that you haven't yet worked with on active transportation or safe routes to school planning that has come about. And if you haven't engaged an actual partner during this time, if there are any thoughts that you might have about who you might wish to work with from your own communities, I think that could be inspirational for our listeners.
This is Jenny. I can chime in.
Great.
So one of the new groups that I was able to partner with was our countywide transportation manager group, as I mentioned in my presentation. So it was a group that had already been meeting, but I was never a part of that group. So that was really nice to be able to connect with new people who are, actively involved in school transportation on a daily basis. One of those folks from our largest school district is someone who I have worked with in the past who has been incredibly supportive of Safe Route to School programs. And so I do encourage folks to reach out to those transportation managers as partners if you haven't already. And then another partner that I reached out to during COVID, somebody who I had worked with in the past, but not for probably 5 or 6 years, was the director of our local public transit organization, Humboldt Transit Authority. And so when we were trying to figure out how to get kids to school that would have normally taken the school bus, but can't because of social distancing, we started thinking about perhaps encouraging middle school and or high school students to take public transit to school. So I reached out to our transit operator, and I was actually able to get some free transit passes to distribute to local family resource centers during, the real kind of crunch time of COVID when it first happened, because, when school started remotely, families were still having to go to school campuses to pick up their meals. And so those bus passes, I think, proved really handy during that time so that, meals could be accessed. So it just got us thinking about other needs.
That's great, Jenny. Maybe Vanessa and Teresa, you can unmute yourselves and see if you can also chime in about different partners. And then I also see here that there is a question about engaging the public for your virtual walk audits piece. So.
So regarding building the partnerships, or what specifically about the partners was the first question?
And sorry, our first question is actually not in the chat. I think about whether or not you've engaged new partners during this period of time, and if that's enhanced your work or allowed you to go in a different direction. And then, the second one is specifically about public engagement for your virtual walk audits.
Yeah, so regarding partnerships, we've definitely built new partnerships to provide bike and ped safety information and training actually in our community. So one of the big ones, we've partnered with schools that have food banks or host food banks on their school site. So working with Second Harvest Food Bank, has been really advantageous because it's not just school community members, it's the entire community that goes. So I think everybody benefits ultimately from having bike and ped safety resources available. But we've also collaborated with an after-school program that, Teresa, please step in if I'm getting this incorrect, but they actually provide childcare for essential workers and first responders. So we worked with them to provide, socially distanced bike rodeos for those students, which has been really great, and we hope to continue that work. And then regarding the virtual walk audits, I see the question in the chat. It was actually a really interesting process how we engaged the public. That school actually has a significant number of monolingual Spanish speakers who weren't comfortable in speaking about traffic concerns in an English-only setting. So we made sure that everything was translated in Spanish. We had interpreters available. And when they went out to do their walks, they actually had school staff help guide them through the process, because sometimes I think the technology gap becomes very apparent when you want to do these kinds of projects. They had a lot of help along the way. And the school principal did a really good job of making sure that we scaled everything to a level where everybody could understand what we were talking about, and really shied away from using terms like walk audit and infrastructure during the discussions. So that was a really great experience too, because we got really great feedback from probably some of the most, if not the most, vulnerable roadway users in that community.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. That's really so helpful. All right, we've got a question from Emily Sinkhorn about, so for those presenters that discussed implementing school streets, what type of barriers and or staffing is utilized during those 30-minute arrival and dismissing times? I'm wondering who of our panel would be the best one to field that that question. I'm wondering possibly if Noelle has fielded those questions from her network and might be able to unmute herself and weigh in.
Yeah, I can give a little bit of insight, but not fully. I mean, school streets has come up as a super popular idea, but haven't yet been implemented. So in our toolkit, we do give a little bit of advice on materials needed, and I think it also really depends on the jurisdiction and what's required, but kind of some ideas on what type of barriers to use. And I think that question about staffing is super important, because if you are doing it for just a portion of the day, the work to go into moving in and out, barriers in and out, to be present there to help make sure that cars don't just drive around the barriers. I think it will take a lot of coordination, and that's one of some of the information we provide in the toolkit is sort of what are all those considerations, how long how much street is being blocked off, how buses are going to get in and out, is there known safety concerns here, and then who is going to help implement and maintain the school street. So I don't have a solid answer for you because it hasn't actually been implemented yet in our community, but I think those are really good questions, and I hope some of the information that's in our toolkit could help you work through what those might be for your community. And I can answer really quickly too the question on partnerships. I think here in the Portland metro area, partnering with food providers, particularly our county hunger program, we've been doing a similar thing of supporting that program, both in delivery of food, because a lot of the food is only available at a few sites, and so we helped coordinate some delivery. One of our Safe Routes programs is doing delivery by bike in one neighborhood, and they've delivered over 2,000 meals, and so there's some really good overlap and partnership happening there. And then, as I mentioned in my presentation, the organization Portland United Against Hate, we're working on partnering more with them on integrating that anti-hate messaging, as well as integrating some programmatic approaches with folks that really have the expertise on how to be proactive in preventing hate incidents.
Thank you so much, Noelle. That's great. And I realized we didn't actually get to hear from the partnership on the partnering question earlier. So wondering if Becky or Corey wanted to chime in and speak to any new partnerships that the partnership has been working with during this time. And then I wanted to also see if the partnership might also have some suggestions about practical barriers and things of that nature for school streets.
This is Becky. I can just chime in as far as exploring different partnerships goes. I want to echo someone earlier was mentioning a little bit the partnership with transit. And that's definitely something that we touch on in our back to school guide, especially within the hybrid learning model. And I know we briefly talked about that earlier this morning with you all, but working with transit agencies and encouraging youth to safely ride and use the transit system if that's available in your community. We've seen that as being a really excellent tool for especially families that have different schedules with the hybrid learning model. Maybe there's different age kids in your family or different work schedules through COVID. It could be a really amazing resource. And if you're partnering with local transit on reduced fares for youth or youth programs, that being a very worthy partnership to explore even in non-COVID times, but especially in that hybrid learning model. And that's definitely something that I've been supporting and encouraging in the region I work in locally here in the Salem-Keizer area in Oregon. And they've continued free fares through COVID. Anybody with essential needs through this time. I know that we're almost at time, but I think that's all I had to say about partnerships. And I'm actually not so sure about the school street closures resources as far as barriers go, but yeah, I will leave it there.
And that's all right. I think we definitely have, we're making our list for topics that we want to explore with our network in 2021. And so school streets is definitely coming up for us with all of the tactical urbanism. And I think it's something that we can save for another point in time. So I think, looking at time, I want to wrap this up. It's been a highly informative webinar, and we are so grateful to our speakers. So Marianne, if you wouldn't mind just advancing us off to a few other slides. I want to say, I see that Corey is leaving us, so I want to say a big thank you first to all our presenters, especially Corey and Becky, Noelle and Jenny, Teresa and Vanessa. Just really excellent work. I hope this has been as inspiring for you as it has been for our team. And the next slide, please. As noted earlier, a recording of this webinar, along with all the slides and the resources discussed, will be posted to the Active Transportation Resource Center website. And this is the link, which will get to you via email following this presentation. And the next slide. I believe we are administering a survey following this webinar to just gauge your feedback on today's webinar and how you plan on using the content. And we will also be asking whether or not you have additional interest in receiving technical assistance from the Active Transportation Resource Center Non-Infrastructure team. And my last slide is just a big thank you. On behalf of the Active Transportation Resource Center, I want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us on for the webinar today. As always, you can reach out to us at any time for questions, concerns. We have our general email addresses on this slide. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And on that note, I just want to thank everyone again. And hope that you can enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.